Today we're speaking with filmmaker, vegan advocate and the 21st Lord of Dunsany, Randal Plunkett. Currently, he's also supporting Hearthstone Veganic Sanctuary in their efforts to expand their land and begin their own rewilding project. This is Animal Rebellion in conversation with Randal Plunkett.
Hi, I'm Lorna Ann.
Hi, I'm Juliana. How are you?
Nice to meet you and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. As you know, we already know quite a bit about your rewilding work in Dunsany Estate where you live. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so starting with a bit of history about Dunsany. Dunsany is quite a large estate, if not one of the biggest estates in the country. My family came with the Normans. So we've been here quite a while. We're actually the oldest family still associated with one place. We've always been a kind of cornerstone of agriculture because even during the era of Randal Plunkett, he had invested a lot of money in some of the most sophisticated farming tools of the time. In our farmyard still has a lot of the relics of back that time. So Dunsany was commonly associated as a big agricultural place, you know, and its prime mead land. The estate is about 1,700 acres, of which about 500 acres is forestry. Now, most of that forestry would be native broadleaf mixed with beech and stuff like that. Little bit of it was plantations from the 50s. So there's a little bit of sort of Douglas fir and stuff like that mixed into our current woodlands. But none of it has ever been harvested. So it's not exactly what you see in Kerry or you know, the West, basically, where it's all like spruce everywhere. There's a constantly fixing holes and things like that. And trust me, living in a castle is as wonderful as it sounds. In practice, it's quite a lot of work. So money is always an issue. So like when I took over, the first sort of idea was, how do I monetize this? How do I make this work? The original idea was organic farming. Now, back then I ate meat and I was a what I would call meathead. If you talk to me about vegetables, I'd say, yeah, with my steak. And then, you know, I tried the normal agriculture for a while. It didn't really take. I didn't like the cruelty side to it because, I mean, the first time I bought cattle, they came with their heads bleeding because they had dehorned them. Now, I never seen anything so rough. Now, as a guy who makes horror movies, I can tell you that was like a horror movie. And looking at these creatures that had blood coming out of their heads and me sitting there kind of like looking after their horns, you know, that doesn't leave you very well. I'm used to fictional blood, but when I see a creature who's suffering, that was not cool. So that didn't do well for me. And then the more I tried to make that sort of thing work for me, it didn't really work. And then financially on top, it was a lot of work and got little to no money out of it. So, you know, after the year or so of that, I finally said, this isn't going to work. So at the time, the environment was pretty bleak. I saw the land was getting quite tired, you know, because overgrazing and over farming is probably one of the biggest problems we have in Ireland today. And animal agriculture is probably the worst because apart from the chemicals that they inject the animals with, the cruelty side to it, it's also extremely hard on land. Land never has a chance to recover. There's never any regeneration or anything like that. And I was always curious about that. How does land stay healthy if there's never if it's the cycle of life is never followed? If you're constantly overgrazing, there's never any time for things to recover. And then on top of that, they cut hay to feed the cattle on top. So there's never anything going back into the soil. So is it so surprising that we have to keep injecting the soil with lots of chemicals? So that never stuck well with me. And I got some generic, should we say, old geezer intellect, which was, oh, sure, the fertilizer does that. Okay, fair enough. Didn't really believe that, but okay, I'll buy that. But then I was making a movie and a lot of these things were on my mind. And you have to understand what I do for a living. I'm a filmmaker. So I suppose you heard the term method acting, the idea where an actor will become the part they're playing to live with that person and thus perform better. I do something similar with my process. I do it with writing. So I start to study things, I obsess about things, and then I start doing things. And one of the themes that I was very interested in was environmental destruction and how the planet would have its revenge on us to wipe us out. And then what would happen afterwards. So these things were floating in my mind a lot, and I thought I couldn't really get into the idea without sort of seeing what would happen. So I removed all the animal agriculture. I had to make a bunch of excuses, and I got to pretend to be a diva, that I have to have my process. Managed to get the animals off the land, and I was very happy. And I was thinking to myself, it's like, you know, at least I don't have to look at sheep screaming because when they take the babies away, that is the most traumatic sound I ever heard. So I started living with the land a little bit, thinking that at least for nothing else, it's going to recover for a while. And it did. Actually, the first thing that happened was weeds galore. I had nothing but thistles and ragwort and nettles and all the stuff that farmers tell you, oh my God, it's dangerous, you're ruining your land. And I was thinking about this, and I said, well, don't want to spray any chemicals, because I don't like pesticides. I mean, the concept of just spraying poison on land just is mental. First year, things looked good, but nothing much changed. Second year, I started seeing a lot more dandelions and thistles and all that stuff, and a lot of ragwort. And my mom was giving out to me saying, you know, we're going to get into trouble with the council and they're going to start fining us, which is always the fear for landowners whenever you see those things. So I wasn't willing to compromise on my spraying, so I started pulling. And that was a feckin' disaster, because the more I pulled, the more they came back. And so I made a calculation that for me to make any real dent, and bear in mind, this was more than 300 acres of grassland now we're talking. So for me to make any real dent, I would have to like pull at least 50 a day. Well, I'm really shitty at maths, because 50 a day was nowhere near the number I needed. So that didn't work. By year 3, it was like pretty heavy. By year 4, it was declining quite a bit. Think about year 3, year 4. Year 5, it declined a lot, and there was almost hardly any of it left in the front field, and there was a bit of it in the back field. And what had happened is it started accumulating in areas. We'd start seeing what used to be yellow flowers everywhere suddenly started having other things, wildflowers, different types of grass. I started seeing insects increase in numbers every year consistently. I roughly estimate that it's about 30% increase yearly at this point. Bees everywhere, butterflies everywhere, spiders everywhere. And then I started rehoming animals as well, because I thought to myself, like, I made a sort of like an eco protection area here. And it was, at that time, I was calling it nature conservation, because rewilding wasn't really a word back then. I think it existed on the fringe, but it certainly wasn't a mainstream word. So what happened was, as time went on, the movie never got made, but I began to really realize, and this was about the same time that I turned vegan, because to be honest with you, even as a meat eater, I kind of could tell that the modern westernized concept of you need meat to survive, it was bullshit. I mean, even a meat eater, I could tell you that was nonsense, because it didn't make sense to me, even genetically speaking. The environment was, I could see it with my own 2 eyes that it was not good for what I was looking. I was looking at what they were doing to like the waterways stuff and all that silage just getting into everything. And I thought that there's no way this is natural. That, and on top of that, you know, if I didn't flavor my meat with herbs, it didn't even taste good. So, you know, I mean, I looked at my dog, and my dog was eating meat, and he didn't seem to care whether there was salt in it or pepper or anything like that. And I tried to eat a bit of meat, and it was the most boring thing. I needed hot sauce. So you go to your instincts, and my instincts were telling me that meat's probably not very good for you. And then I started seeing the science behind it and all the environmental stuff. And I realized that absolutely the only way to go forward would be to be vegan immediately. So I didn't do the transitional thing where I went, oh, well, I think I'll try getting rid of fish. No, meat's not good for you. The science is there. Right. I was eating steak on Monday. I'm eating tofu on Tuesday. And that was it. And I haven't broken it since. And then how can you possibly want to be a vegan and profiteer out of like animal suffering? I found that to be a problem for me. It was all or nothing. And so I decided no more animals ever again, rewilding all the way. What I seen with all the animals returning was absolutely, I was seeing it with my own eyes changing and more animals coming back. And I was looking around at all these crazy farmers. It's like somebody lifted the veil, and suddenly all I could see was the problems in everything. And then I saw all the solutions right there in front of me. And so the rewilding, I call it rewilding now, but the conservation evolved into beyond something that was coming from a film into something that I needed. And it was funny because it was my career that pushed me in that direction, or led me to think about these concepts that ended up basically redirecting my life. And now look, I'm 7 years vegan, 7 years of rewilding, I think this year. And, you know I'm right. I can't prove it yet. I'm slowly trying to build the science so I can prove to other people and then shape from within. That's kind of how I feel.
We know that you've had experiences, well, challenging experiences with hunters. in your
Oh,
area.
yeah.
So
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
hear a bit about that and some of the challenges you faced from the work that you've done.
Well, let me put it like this. When I took charge of Dunsany, we had gunshots going off every weekend. There were people on the land. You have to understand that County Meath is a hunting center. Everybody calls me a West Brit, ironically, and there they are on ponies wearing basically the armor of oppression in Ireland, which is those red jackets. You know, because that whole thing was a way to oppress the Irish people. From day one, we've always had problems with hunts. We have 4 different hunts, and they literally are surrounding us. You know, my neighboring farms are all like where the kennels are. So we were having problems. During hunting season, there would be bullets flying past. I mean, we had a window shot out. We had regular gunshots near the house. So, you know, at first, we would call the police, we'd throw them out, we'd send them annoying letters. Of course, these guys they don't care, and they sort of can do what they want without any kind of problems with the law. And so if they're going to hunt every weekend, well, then I'm going to patrol every weekend. I'm going to stop them. And if they're going to suddenly start coming in the week, well, I'm going to come on the week. And if they're going to be there at dawn, well, I'll be there at dawn. So I started patrolling my land every single night, and especially during hunting season. So that's from September till about March. Every night, 7 days a week, I was there driving. And the time that they tend to shoot deer and stuff like that tends to be in the evening times. So I would typically clock about 2 to 3 hours in my car, just circling my estate with binoculars. And the first year, I think there was upwards of 50 calls to the police on hunters and poachers and dodgy vehicles. The second year was, I think, 40. Third year was somewhere in the upper 30s. Fourth year was about the same. Last year, I think, was a bit less, last year, as in the year before COVID, was about 29. COVID, 3, 4 calls. This year, nothing yet. So I managed to curb it. Now, at the same time, like, I was relentless, and I started really getting in the face of these people. And as for the actual hunt on horses, you know, I started having people hand me their schedules, and I started turning up and following them around and making them feel uncomfortable. I videotaped them. I would do all the stuff that they wouldn't like. And look, people threatened to burn me out of my house, to kill me, to beat me up. I got too worried because my car was so recognizable that I can't park my car around my estate because they'll slash the tires. I've had every sign in my estate yanked down. I've had my no hunting sign shot at. I have to regularly change padlocks on my estate, probably once a month, because people are putting glue in the locks. I press charges on numerous hunts. I've even gone for injunctions, threatened injunctions with some of these hunts. And I've got one crew who, you know, like I said, were stupid enough to actually write on the line about how they were going to stick my head on a stick and they were going to set fire to my house. And I pushed that to the police. And of course, the police, well, let's just say I gave that to them more than a year and a half ago. I'm still waiting for my prosecution. And because I'm like a dog with a bone, you know, I'm not the type of person who says, oh, well, I'll let it go. No, if they want to be relentless, I'll be relentless. And that's kind of how I started doing it. And you know what? For all the faults and all the stuff and fights, I curbed poaching greatly. We have very little poaching. Now, it does happen, and every year you have to be vigilant, but it has come down so much. And, you know, I got to know these people. You know, I tried diplomacy. Diplomacy doesn't work with these people because they think that they're better than everybody, and they torture animals for a living or for an enjoyment. So how do you deal with that? You know, there is something to be said if you're living in a situation where you have to kill to eat. But this is not Ireland. We have Tesco's. Lidl has a great fruit and vegetable side of the market, which food comes. I can get avocados all year round. And whether you feel that that's a good thing or a bad thing, the truth of the matter is that we have alternatives. And on top of that, the science doesn't even make sense to eating those kinds of things. So we are in a better situation. There's no reason for us to hunt, except for to satisfy a sort of perverse part of our character, which shouldn't be, you know, even stimulated. We should be trying to evolve to a better thing, because the days of hunter-gatherer are over. we have agriculture, we have science, we should be trying to embrace something better. And we are talking about a fair society. How can one really try and give people equality if we can't even have equality or respect for the creatures that inhabit our planet with us? It's sort of ridiculous when people talk to me about people being equal and having compassion for people when we can't even have compassion for the environment around us. You can't do one without the other. So I think if we want to evolve into a greater species, which I believe we can do, we have to leave our prehistoric ideas behind and embrace something that's better. People often say to me, oh, but it's our nature. It's like, bullshit, it's our nature. This is taught. This is what we've had to do for survival. And unfortunately, it has become not about survival. It has become more about something else. And that's the problem with the world today. We will never get past the problems of the world today until we can sort of leave that behind and say we are now humans 2.0.
I hear you talking, and I can see that obviously there has been a very long learning process. Now you are going to collaborate with Hearthstone Sanctuary. How are you going to bring all that knowledge, all those things that you have learned? And can you tell us a bit of the project that you are working with, Nia?
So Hearthstone Sanctuary, we should say, Dunsany is not essentially a sanctuary. I should point that out. There was a concept at one point that I thought about doing a sanctuary. And I thought to myself, yeah, that definitely should be done. The problem was when I looked at things at a long-term point of view, I thought to myself, like, there are sanctuaries around. There's nowhere near enough of them, and there's nowhere near enough money for them, most importantly. But the wild, there was nothing. I think there is no, and the national parks, it's a different thing. Those are parks. They're not wild. And I'm not saying that my bit is wild either, but it's the closest thing to it. There's no bins and there's no public toilets, and we let things rot as they fall. I don't have to have all that stuff. So the problem is that I've created something that I felt was lacking in Ireland, particularly. There was nobody else who had land, or I would say the means to create what I was going to create. So that's why I started that. Now, the problem was I couldn't get past the idea that I still wanted to save things. So I started helping with releasing animals, and we met Nia, and she was very supportive of my work. And I got really into Hearthstone. I started following it on Instagram. And then I got a call from her, and she asked me whether I would get more directly involved, to which I said yes, because the truth of the matter is the hardest part, it's not someone like me who makes the big change, because a guy like me has a bit more means than everybody else. But the truth of the matter is what makes change are all these smaller places who are doing it, who work every day, like Hearthstone. I mean, there's no money there. There's nothing but sacrifice. It's struggle every single day. So when I speak to her, I'm inspired because, you know what, here's someone who didn't have the benefits that I had, who's fighting every single day to protect animals who do not have a voice in our society, to uplift, not to destroy. For me, that's very inspiring. And that's direct action. And the thing is that I have a little bit of a platform, and I'm hoping that anything that I get from what I'm doing, you try and spread it as much as possible, because look, there's lots of places doing what we're doing. And Hearthstone, for me, it's the one that I have closest to my heart, because I feel the most engaged. And I even have a little cow there that I got to name. So I'm super into that, and the truth is it's very pure, and the thing is, I feel as someone who spent a large time consuming and, not giving a damn, just interested in myself, indulging in things that really are based in cruelty. And as I get older, as I see the things around me, and I look to the future and I look at these things, I mean, how could I not really want to change the world I live in? And money is paper. It means nothing. If we don't have an environment, if we don't have our ideals to live by, then we are just exactly what everybody says. We're just animals. And I don't think we are. I think we are an evolution, and I think we should be the ones empowering our environment, not destroying it. But I think that that's not an easy thing to do. It's always easy to take the simple road, but the higher road, it's harder. But I do feel that in the end, it bears the most fruit.
Carrying out fundraising to buy a bigger piece of land. And can you tell us about the plans that you have for that land?
I think the most important thing with sanctuaries is support. And support comes in three different ways. One is promoting the concept of protecting wildlife and especially animals who don't have a say. Because to be honest, if we all went vegan tomorrow, we'd have we'd have to destroy all these animals, right? And I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I would like to see us transitioning away from this kind of barbaric thing. And this is where sanctuaries come in, because as time goes on, we might see more and more farmers turning into sanctuaries, and that needs to be encouraged. And this is what the reason why I think I never went vegan earlier, because I'd have people who are trying to judge me, who point their finger and say, no, you're wrong, this is what, and that, I never heard that. I'd listen to it and I'd be like, go eat some protein, but it's not what conquered me was someone pointing their finger. What conquered me was them giving me logic, giving me science, and giving me a way out. Because I think fundamentally everybody knows. I mean, you might not be willing to admit it, but everybody knows that what we're doing is bad. I knew. I wasn't willing to accept it. I was worried about how my life would be. And this is, I think, the same with animal agriculture. I mean, there's environmental destruction. They're cutting down the rainforest, and people say, oh, but it's for soya. Yeah, but that soya doesn't go to us. That goes to the cattle. And how much water is left? Well, let's be serious here. We're destroying all our water supplies. For us to really transition, we will need sanctuaries, and sanctuaries like Hearthstone they're basically on the front line. And so, they can only do so much. And we are going to have massive casualties in the future with losses with both human and animal. And we just need to open up as much to take in as many as we can. But there's a fine line between trying to save and then putting animals in a position where they're not living well. Animals need to roam. They need to have habitat. They need to have companionship. They need to be able to mate. They need to be able to, because there is emotion there and psychology as well. Anyone who's spent any significant amount of time with an animal knows that they aren't simple creatures. Even the most simplistic, even a chicken has feelings, has emotions, it has companionship. So we have to kind of prepare ourselves to kind of like phase things out. And part of that is creating areas where these animals can go and be part of society in a greater sense. And I mean that is in a natural society. I don't mean that we have to go on the bus with the chicken, but we do need to have that stuff. And we're seeing it already. People are pushing away from the old ideals. I mean, more and more, I myself became vegan and I never thought I would be vegan. And off the back of me, I've convinced at least 7 or 8 people to become vegan. And now here I am talking about veganism. It comes from encouragement. It comes from transitioning people away. Hearthstone is an example, and I'm hoping that many people will follow it. And we'll start seeing more sanctuaries. We should have a sanctuary in every county, and that's part of the rewilding is creating a better situation for us and the animals.
I know you guys do a lot of reforesting there, as well as like rewilding and different like techniques for farming crops and stuff. So what's your vision for the place moving forward?
I think Hearthstone is at its early stages. The biggest problem is financial. So if there's any viewers or readers who are gonna, see this and be inspired, the money that is donated is spent directly on the animals. I can stand behind that statement. It covers basically Hearthstone's expenses. And Nia is a 7-day-a-week person. You know what I mean? So it goes to the animals. So what we would like to see is an expansion, creating habitats, because that's how animals come back. That's how animals flourish. You see, the biggest problem we have today is that we're living in an unnatural world, and big open fields with no hedgerows and no trees, although it produces like a certain amount of steak, it's not a natural way. Animals are more prone to disease, they're more prone to depression, and the thing is I think creating habitats for these animals, and maybe in the future, even something in the regards to what they do at the NEP estate, where you have animals in free roam around a wild area, could be certainly a more beneficial way of treating the animals, and will prevent probably a lot of ailments. I know that part of the biggest problem for things like sheep is that they sit in wet areas for long periods of time, and they can't go up hills, they can't go up, their habitats are so limited that they are prone to all sorts of diseases. Thus, you have to spend a fortune in vets. But if they were given sort of wider areas to go about, they would probably have less needs, if you know what I mean. So I think with Hearthstone, I think I'd like to see it expand. I would like to see more people maybe going to visit it and perhaps there can be a way of monetizing it in a way that it will benefit the work. But I also feel that people need to be involved with it. At least, they need to be able to see it and see that there's an alternative. And I think Hearthstone's a good example of how that could work. I'm hoping in time we can expand it out. I'm hoping that more people will want to copy that, because that's what we really want. I think we all want to see, an evolution of where we're at now. And I'm not gonna say a pass judgment on anyone who's not doing or doesn't believe in what I believe in, because if I did that, I would never have accepted myself. And I think it requires time and showing a bit of light onto something, and people to sort of think about it for a long period of time. And then you'll find that people go that way anyway. We're programmed that way, let's be honest.
So just to end, Randal, can I ask you, how can people support your project there in Dunsany and Hearthstone itself?
Well, I would say at the moment, Hearthstone definitely needs the most support. So I would say certainly if you have a few extra coins, if you have a little extra time, it's not just about money. It's about helping. It's about facilitating. It's about, anything that can be done to benefit the animals, whether it's donating some extra hay that you have, whether it's helping out on the farm, whether it's direct action is always the best. And if you're not in a means to do that and you have just a few extra shekels in your pocket, throw a few shekels. But if you're not, tell somebody else about it. Knowledge is power, and there's a lot of people with a lot of expertise who are, can offer some benefit, even just from supporting, on Facebook, on Instagram, because allowing the story of Hearthstone and the story of Dunsany to get to a wider audience is the first step in creating ideas. People will probably start to come to a lot of the conclusions that we hope they will come to, and maybe that will ignite a bit of change.
When can we come visit you in Dunsany?
Well, as soon as you guys are able to get out here, I would be happy to show you. Like if you come in the summer, the grass is like way high, and then you see deer pop out, and it's amazing.
It sounds magical, doesn't it?
Well, what the problem is that we in Ireland deserve a lot more. Dunsany, unfortunately, it's a jewel, but it should be the standard. I hate to say it. The biggest problem today is that it seems so magical because we're so not used to that kind of thing. But some of my biggest supporters are the old people who used to remember Ireland before the motorways and the trains and the concrete everywhere. We had a ranger here who used to control the deer when it first started, when I first took over before I went vegan. And then he unfortunately, he died during the lockdown. And I was speaking to his family, and the family said to me, he spent his whole career shooting things and controlling animals. And the last few years since he stayed at Dunsany and started getting involved with the rewilding, he said to his wife and his family, he's like, I spent my whole life killing things, and now I just want things to live.
Wow.
And that's the magic of what I'm talking about here. It's anyone who doesn't understand, I sound like a lunatic who lives in La La Land. But the truth is, when you live and you see things blossom and come, you start to see the error in your ways. And that's the problem. I wasn't aware of it before, and it took time to get here. Don't get me wrong. I didn't drop the red pill and just was like, whoa. It took time to get here. But like any sort of form of enlightenment, it's a journey, and I'm still learning every day. And look, I'm not some egghead scientist, I'm a hack filmmaker. So, if it was possible for me to find my way in this path, I'm really hoping that in time, loads of people will, and then we can actually have a decent society. We can live better. My great relative started the co-ops here and the Women's Association, and even was involved with the credit union. These are socialistic things that benefited the average person, not the elite. But he took a big chance and was very heavily penalized as a result of it. And I get that myself. Don't get me wrong, it's a sacrifice. But if someone like me isn't going to take initiative, how can I possibly ask someone else to take initiative, someone who doesn't have the means? It's a responsibility of people who are born into privilege to do something to further their home and their country. And I'm very proud of where I come from. And I'm very proud of the people. But I also feel that it's not about leading people. It's about showing people a possibility of something else or something better that I believe in. And that's what every person in my position should be thinking about before making decisions, because this isn't about me. It's not even about the next generation. It's about 4 generations from now. It's about what kind of world do we want to live in. And the thing is that if people like myself aren't going to step up, then there's no point.
I just can be here listening to you for hours.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, really, and for the work that you're doing. Absolutely.
I'm so glad that you tolerated me for this interview. But listen, thank you so much, and spread the word, because I think this is good stuff that we're doing here. And Ireland should be a leading country in this, because our country is green, or at least it's supposed to be. So we should be doing it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, guys. And listen, have a great weekend.
You too.